Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Tracy Cook, and I'm the online media manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Decision Making and the Business Analyst. Today's webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the question and answering session at the end. Please be sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the GoToWebinar software. Today's featured speaker is Steve Blaise, PMP, PMI, PBA, author, consultant, teacher, and coach. And Steve has over 55 years of experience in information technologies. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Tracy, and welcome to everyone. And we are here going to talk about decision making and the BA, and specifically about the BA making decisions. And so we'll start off with a definition. Here's a definition. Now, this definition happens to be of decisiveness. And the idea here is if you want to go get ahead, you want to move up into the higher echelons of the organization, there are certain things that you need to have. And the Office of Personnel Management of the United States has designated several of them. There's 6 characteristics. 2 of them are things that BAs generally have, that you have in ACEs. One is problem solving, and the other is decisiveness, what you're looking at right here. Now, notice that the definition says timely decisions, even when data are limited, and even when the solutions produce unpleasant consequences. Time is kind of the enemy of decision making, as you will see. So let's go ahead and discuss what decision making is. And if you can start getting into the idea of decision making and facilitating decisions, then you might kind of find yourself working your way up. So the first question is, yeah, I'm a business analyst, but what kind of decisions do I make anyway? Now, here's our business analyst. Those who have been to previous these webinars will recognize the young lady. She's always here as the business analyst, and she's always asking questions. Should we add that new feature or wait until the next release? What can we cut from the next delivery and stay within the schedule? Okay, I'm short on time. Maybe I should have a meeting with all the stakeholders at once, but they keep arguing. I can't make up my mind on that. Sal and Chris keep pushing to have their requirements top priority in the upcoming release. But we can only do one. So which one am I going to give priority to? That's a decision. I don't want to make enemies anybody. I decided I was going to talk to Arthur because he's got all the information, and that way I'll have the requirements. And we set it up so that I could talk to him, and we're now 2 weeks delivery. We're late. Why? Because Arthur got sick. Now, how was I supposed to know that Arthur got sick? They're telling me I made a bad decision. I think I need a long weekend. Now, should I take off Friday or Monday? Decisions. Well, there are types of decisions. Not that we want to go and categorize them and split them up and put them in pigeonholes, but the types of decisions that we look at in decision analysis really fall into just 2 categories. First of all, you have what are called programmed or automated decisions. These are the decisions that you make really without thinking. Stepping on the brake in the car, turning on your sleep switch when you wake up in the morning so you get an extra 5, making coffee for the morning, driving to work. These things you can do automatically. You ever kind of driven on the highway on your way to work for the 185th day in a row, and you're driving along and you look up and you say, how did I get here? Last thing I remember was 8 miles back, and you suddenly get really scared. I zoned out. For 8 miles, I could have had an accident. Well, you couldn't because you were on automatic pilot. Those are programmed decisions, habitual decisions that you do without thinking. And that's good, right? Now, the other side, of course, is the opposite, non-programmed decisions, and that's everything else. Especially in business, we're talking primarily non-programmed decisions. There's not a whole lot of decisions you do automatically, other than make the coffee. There's not a lot you do automatically at the office. And those, you can talk about things like the executives are doing strategic decisions. Should we do an M&A? Should we buy that other company over there? Should we have a new product line? Should I retire the old product line? Should we open a new plant? Strategic decisions that have to be made. Now, the second area is the crosscut, or wide impact decisions. Now, this terminology comes from McKinsey. Now, these are ones that they're not focused on one area, but across different departments, different agencies, different areas of the organization. So if you make a decision, there'll be a wider impact. And finally, you have ad hoc, tactical, the ones we make every day. A decision to go to a meeting or not go to a meeting. The decision to turn that report in or not return it in because I want to do another review of it. Those are all the decisions. Now, here's an interesting thing. As human beings, and I'm assuming we're all human beings here, I would assume, we have a neuropsychological relationship with problems and decisions. It actually biologically does something. Let me draw you a little graph here. It has to do with stress. So there's time, there's stress. Over here, where they meet, is where we have to make a decision. We have been notified a decision must be made, or we see that we have to make a decision. And it doesn't matter what decision it is, any decision. What happens is that our stress level starts going up. Now, that was supposed to be nice and slow. It didn't. Keeps going up until the point at which the decision is actually made. Then it precipitously drops. Now, in some cases, you may have had this. You're worried about making a decision. What school am I going to go to college as a high school student? These are decisions, and you can feel the stress. You can feel it. Other times, you don't feel it. It's low level, but it's there. You know when you feel it? When you make the decision and suddenly it's gone. This is normal. This is natural. All human beings go through it. We all want to solve problems, and a decision is a problem. So the stress builds up until we solve it. Now it's solved. Ah, good. Now, if you're a business analyst or an engineer, you immediately turn around and do another problem. So if we feel great when we make the decision. Not only that, but it's even more. When you make that decision, there's a little squirt of dopamine that comes out of the bens accumbens up in the right part of your frontal cortex. The same thing if you eat sugar or somebody gives you a compliment, you get that little squirt of pleasure. It feels good. It feels good to make that decision. You've got the loss of stress that had been building up, and you got a squirt of dopamine, and yet we still put off making decisions as long as we can. So what is going on here? Well, speaking of neuropsychological, let's take one more peek at the neuropsychological thing here. And that is good old System 1 and System 2. Okay? Now, System 1, and this is from Daniel Kahneman, who unfortunately we lost earlier this year. In fact, in his honor, I'm referencing his other book. He only wrote 2. So this is from Thinking Fast and Slow. And the concept of System 1 and System 2 isn't solely his. Cass Sunstein, Richard O'Reilly, Richard Thayer, a whole bunch of people have the same concept. It's been going around in behavioral psychology and behavioral economics and so forth for a couple of 3 decades. The idea is that your brain kind of lives in two parts. System 1 is your reptile brain, they would call it. It's your limbic system. It's your amygdala. It's where you make your automatic decisions, your quick decisions. You don't think about them. The fight or flight, right? It just happens. You just move. It's pulling your hand off the stove before you realize it's hot. This is System 1. We call this intuition. We can call it trusting your gut, making a gut decision. It's coming out of System 1. Don't make me think. I've got the answer. I got the decision. Now, System 2 is slower. It requires some thinking. It requires some analysis. It requires some structure. It requires concentration. It is in the frontal cortex, the cerebral cortex. where the thinking of system 2 goes on. And there's a body reaction to thinking. Your muscles tense, blood pressure might go up, although in some people who are deeply into system 2, by virtue of getting in the zone, flow, as they say, your blood pressure actually goes down. And you're creating thoughts. Now, system 1 will handle the programmed. System 2 will handle the non-programmed. And this is the split, we say, and we want to, according to Kahneman now and others, we want to be aware of system 1, be wary of system 1. System 1 has a lot of biases, automatic reactions that are just not true. We make wrong judgments. We make mistakes in decisions depending on system 1. We should be moving for most decisions into system 2. Now, we have to have a system 1. We don't want to. Can you imagine? Just think about all the decisions you made today. Doesn't matter what time it is, thousands, because you're not thinking of them all. Right? To get out of bed and put your feet on the floor, that was a decision. To stand up, another decision. Which foot are you going to step off with, left or right? That's another decision. Can you imagine having to make all those decisions, think about them, and say, okay, let's see, if I lift my left foot, no, I better start off with the right foot, because then I'll end up on the left foot when I get to the end of the hall. No, I better. You'd never get anything done. That's what system 1 is there. Turn things into a habit so it automatically does. So it's a valuable thing to have, but Kahneman warns us that there's probably too much dependence on system 1. Now, Gary Klein, who worked with Dan Kahneman in a couple of places, wrote a book called Sources of Power. It's having its 20-year anniversary, and he studied firemen and emergency room nurses, pediatric nurses, emergency rescue squad, frontline soldiers, police. He studied all of these to see how they made their decisions. And it turns out that he's a staunch supporter of system 1. One example that I remember is a group of firefighters had just put the fire out in a house. And they were walking through the house, checking out to make sure that all the fire was out and the cinders were all gone and so forth. And they're standing in the kitchen, and the fire's out. There's no smoke, nothing. And they're doing their relax afterwards, they're chatting. And the lieutenant suddenly says, "Everybody out of the kitchen now." So they all bail. Nobody asks. They just bail out of the kitchen. Now, a few seconds later, the kitchen floor collapses. Turns out the fire was still going in the basement and had burned up through the kitchen floor. Had he not said, "Get out of the kitchen," they would have lost people. So people would have fallen into the fire. They would have at least been injured. Probably they could have died. So Klein asked him afterwards, "Why did you do that? What prompted you to do that, to make that decision of getting everybody out of there?" The lieutenant did not know, had no clue. He just said, "It just came to me that there's a problem. We've got to get out of the kitchen." That is the kind of thing that system 1, that Gary Klein says we've got to depend on system 1. And of course, Klein and Kahneman are somewhat at odds, friendly so, but they're at odds. Because we are not firemen, well, we fight fires, but we don't have, we're not traumatic, and we're not life-saving situation. We're business analysts. So the idea behind Klein and his work, that's valid, but it really doesn't apply to us in the business sense. So we're going to focus on system 2 here for the remainder of these slides. Now, I have said, you may have heard me say or read some things that I wrote, and I'm a staunch believer that business analysts don't have authority, especially decision authority. They can decide what they're doing for themselves and how they're going to set up the business analyst to approach and so forth, but they're not out there deciding what the company's going to do or making any decisions like that. However, they will be asked to assist or advise on a continuous basis. We need to decide to do this project, that one. Get the benefits of each and help me out here. Help me make that decision. Business managers are in conflict about that set of requirements. Which one should we include? You're the requirements expert. Give me some advice. Let me know what your recommendation is. I need to know what the best option is here. So they're coming to the business analysts. These are executives and people in the organization. So the takeaway is, even though you won't be making a decision, you still are going to be asked to provide data and probably a recommendation to the decision-making team. Pause for effect. Steve, did you say decision-making team? We got people make their own decision. What team are you talking about? This is the decision-making team. Whenever there are decisions, business decisions now, and even personal decisions, we're going to go to the movies Friday night. What's this? This is Thursday. Tomorrow night, we're going to go to the movies, a group of us, and so we have to decide that we're going to the movies. That decision is going to be made by a decision-making team. The decider is the entity with a voice and authority. Now, no, I say entity. That means it isn't necessarily a person. It could be a committee. It could be a board. It could be a group of people. So our fledgling theater-going group, we might have a couple of people, Steve, you and Fred, figure out which movie we're going to go see. So then we're going to get some information providers. Okay, Jack, what's playing over at your multiplex? Sally, what's over there? What kind of movies does everybody like? We need information. The deciders need to get information about the decision. So they're going to be looking for people to provide that. And guess who might be doing that? The business analyst. Then they're going to go for advisors. So they're going to ask somebody, have you seen this movie? What'd you think about it? I kind of like the movies you see, and we enjoy the same thing. So what did you think about this movie? Oh, too long, huh? Okay, yeah, I don't want to go to a long movie. Thank you for that advice. That also could be a business analyst. And generally would be, because if they're talking about new processes, new systems, new requirements, who else would be a better trusted advisor? Now, I do want to point out that we don't necessarily have to have multiple people. These are roles. We need these three roles in any decision we're making. So, Steve, you're the one that's going to go do the decide on the movie. It's all on your shoulders. Oh, okay, gee. All right, so I'm the decider, and I'm going to then go online and check all the movie theaters in the area and find out what movies are playing. I'm getting the information. I am an information provider, providing information to myself. So I go to Google and find out what movies are being played. Then I look up the reviews. I like this guy's reviews, so I'll check his reviews, and maybe I'll call somebody, but I'll do it all myself. One person, three roles. We always have these three roles: decision-making team, and as you can see, the BA play either or both of those, the support roles. You are likely part of corporate decision-making, whether you know it or not. So let's talk about. You're going to be facilitating decision-making. Your role, according to Kathleen Barrett, your role is a corporate problem solver. Kathleen Barrett was the original president of the IIBA. Another role that I like that, I constantly use it, but another one is the facilitating person, the person who facilitates. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm going to go as the facilitator and run a meeting. I can facilitate without ever even getting near the head of the meeting. I just sit at the table. Facilitation means I am going to help somebody else achieve their goal. So if we're going to help facilitate the decision-making, we're helping the decider and possibly the support team to get to a point where they can make a decision. We may do any or all of these things. Define what business decisions that have to be made. That's fine. That we probably aren't going to do this. Someone's going to come in and say, "Here's the decision we have to look at. Are we going to open a branch in Oshkosh?" We then are going to define the context. What's behind that decision? Why are we making that decision now? Then we're going to analyze those decisions to find out what questions we need to have answered in order to make that decision. What information do we need? And we'll define that information. Then we're going to go out and get that information and provide that to the decision makers, facilitating, helping them out. We're going to recognize the obstacles and biases, and we're going to talk about those here shortly so that you can see them and recognize them for yourself. So when you're there facilitating the CEO of your organization and making a very big decision, you will know what the obstacles and biases are, and sometimes you can recognize them. You're also going to assist them in creating alternate and evaluating options. We're not going to stop at one. That would be a mistake. And finally, you may be making recommendations. You create the alternatives, you may be making recommendations to the decision maker. Which brings up, how do you go about doing that? Well, it just so happens, that's a good statement, Dan, behind every decision is a business analyst. Remember, business analyst is a role, so it may not be somebody whose title is business analyst, but they're doing business analyst work. They're analyzing the business. They're there providing business information and analysis to the decision maker. And occasionally we'll make recommendations, and this is a template, if you will, and it works very well. Now, this came out of business case work. How do you present a business case? Now, business case is a decision paper. Here is my case for running this project, for solving this problem, for putting up $1.2 million to do it. That's what this business case says. So you have a decision to make. So the presentation is, we start off by stating the problem, and this is putting it in context. This is the decision to be made. Then we state, this is why we have to make that decision. It's not always clear, and sometimes it's not the same reason that the person you're talking to might think it is. There are two, in addition to the basic reason, there are two other things you want to talk about. What is the time frame for making it? We have to make this decision to do this by December 1st. It's a regulation that goes into effect April 1st. It's going to take us 3 to 4 months to get the software and everything up and running, so we'll be qualified, we'll be compliant with that regulation April 1st. We have to make that decision by December 1st, or we're going to start running out of time and run the risk that we will have to pay $20,000 a day for being non-compliant in April. I'm explaining the time frame and the risk of not making the decision when you should. Now I'm going to offer more than one alternative. Alternative A, B, and C. Now there are several approaches to setting up those alternatives, because especially when you start out, it becomes difficult to come up with another alternative. Confirmation bias kicks in, and you've got one. The availability heuristic kicks in, you got just one. Now, once you've got the alternatives, for each alternative you present, each alternative, this is the benefits of doing that alternative, this is the risks of doing that alternative, and here's their stale date. Now, you say, oh, wait, hold on, stale date? What for an alternative? What's a stale date? Let's go back to the movies. Friday night, we're going to the movies, and we can't make up the minds. So we got plenty of time. Now it is Friday night, and Star Wars starts at 5:30, James Bond starts at 6, and a romantic comedy starts at 6:30. Those are the ones we're trying to decide which one to go see. Comes 5:30, we haven't made up our mind yet. Goodbye, Star Wars. It's stale dated. It's no longer available. We're still arguing and talking and trying to come up with whether we're going to go to the rom-com or to James Bond. It's 6:05. James Bond's gone. The only one we have left is the rom-com. Now we're having a discussion about whether we want to go to the rom-com or not. 6:31. We can't see the rom-com. We can't go to any movie, so we go play darts. That's stale dating. We must make the decider aware of the options he has or she has, and when you're going to lose those options. Because just about all options have a time at which it's no longer available. Now we can build that compliance for April 1st as long as we start by December 1st. So you need to make the decision by December 1st. If you don't make the decision by December 1st, we have to go with the buy process because we won't have time to build it. And if you don't make your mind up by the middle of January, we don't even have the buy purchase. We're going to have to rent the process from somebody else. So there's always a a stale date on those options, and we want to make it clear what those are and what will happen if they don't make a decision by that point. Finally, you may recommend one alternative. You say, well, I really don't want to recommend things. I mean, I don't want to take that responsibility. It doesn't matter. If you state the three options, I can guarantee you the decider is going to look at you and say, okay, Steve, which one would you choose? Which one do you think is the better one? Something is going to ask. Now, I like to recommend because that way I don't get into somebody saying, which one's the better one? Then it sounds like I'm putting a quality on it. So I just go, here are the one we recommend. Now, when you do, state why you want it. Even though you might be repeating some of the stuff of the benefits, also state why you didn't choose the others. That's how you make recommendations to the decision maker as a business analyst. Now, you could also do the same thing. You can do the same pattern if you're making recommendations to your friends to go to the movies. Here are the alternatives. Here are the three movies. This is a good one, and because of this, and so-and-so says this is a good movie, and this is what I would recommend. Present all information necessary to the decision maker. Be prepared for the decision maker to ask for additional information. And note the last one, only that information. We don't want to give any more information than is necessary to make the decision. It just starts muddying the words, it works up, and makes it harder to make the decision. You say, okay, good, got it. But Steve, I've done that, and they don't come up with a decision. Have you ever had a boss that is supposed to make a decision about something and didn't do it? And you wonder, is it indecision? Is this guy indecisive? Or is he really thinking it over? Is this a legitimate checking out of the information? Okay, well, here's a way you can find out. Ask the question. You give him time to make the decision, and you feel like it's gone on too long now, and we do need this decision made. Say, what information do you need to make your decision? Or some words to that effect. And if they tell you, oh, yeah, I'm waiting for this and this, and I'd really like to know about this, I'm concerned about that. Well, that's your job, business analyst. Go get the information, analyze it, bring it back, and here it is. If they say, no, there's no information, I'm dealing with it, probably you're looking at some indecision there. Just to be sure, pause a little bit, maybe interject a casual comment or something, and then come back and say, what's stopping you from making the decision? Why is it difficult? Try not to cast any aspersions. If they say, well, it's because of this, again, back to the business analyst. I'm going to add something to do with the business. It would have to be, right? So you're going to help them overcome it. Well, did you think about this and help that? You're going to facilitate. If they say, no, there's nothing stopping me from a decision, and I don't need any more information. Well, yeah, they're just plain indecisive. Now, what do you do about that? I don't know. But at least and you can make plans accordingly, and just accept it, I guess. But at least it's indecision, and you've done what you could to help make that decision. So what is the indecision all about? There are two layers here. The roadblocks, the decision blockers on the outside. This guy's going in two roads to walk down, like Robert Frost, right? And so I called it roadblock, because someplace down there are these blocks. First, you have uncertainty. That's probably the primary one. I don't know. We've got known unknowns out there. We don't know about this. We've got unknown unknowns. We don't know about what we don't know. What if we do this? What if we do that? It's uncertain. And we don't like to deal with that. We like to be certain. We like what is called our mindset is causal in nature. You'll see that in a minute. It may be complex, cascading decisions. If I decide yes here, then that means I've got another decision here, which is going to cause two more decisions here, which is going to cause 5 more decisions there. I can't take it. It's too many. I can't see the whole thing. Where there's only 1 or 2 decisions, I can deal with that. But, I'm not sure what's going on with all these decisions. Could be high risk. If we go this way, we're going to have to lay off these people. If we go that way, we have to lay off those people. I don't want to do that for anybody. Then we have TMI, or in this case, TMA, Too many alternatives. Now, on one hand, it's a great idea to bring up a lot of alternatives. The more alternatives, the better choice you'll have at the end. However, it also makes it more difficult to actually make that choice. Okay. The more alternatives you have, the harder it is to make a decision. Just like the more risk you have, harder it is. Okay. Then the one that's the emotional one, the interpersonal issues. So we're going to the movies, and Sally is a rom-com fan, and Jack and Joe and Jill are all James Bond fans, and then we got the Star Wars guys. I got to decide the movie. Somebody's not going to be happy. I don't want to do that. These are all my friends. This is great. But I can't make a decide, and it's not the choice of movie that I'm deciding anymore. What I'm doing is deciding which friend am I going to upset. And I'm deciding and I'm weighing, well, Jack gets really, really upset. And Alice over here, who wants to see Star Trek, she doesn't really care that much. So, in terms of feedback and negative, I'd rather deal with Alice than Jack. I'm not dealing with the facts, with the decision. I'm dealing with the people. And that's very hard for us as human beings to dispel. Finally, you have politics. Well, now Sally, the only one who wants rom-com, but she happens to be my boss. So guess where we're going to the movies? We're going to a rom-com. Politics is any factor that affects the decision, which is not directly related to the decision itself. We classify all the rest of the world here under politics. The takeaway, roadblocks exist. Go over them, go under them, dismantle them, select another road. Okay? In most cases, the way to overcome these obstacles is with more data. As Sherlock Holmes said, data, Watson, I need more data. I can't function without data. That's actually a quote from Sherlock Holmes. So now let's look at the other side, the inside. Now, this comes, many of these, this is a book that he put out last year, I think, called Noise. And instead of calling things cognitive biases, he's calling them noise. And he explains why the problem is in the wording. A cognitive bias, by his own definition, and he and Amos Tversky kind of blazed the way, if you will, into cognitive biases and all the studies that have been done, whole industry now studying. I recall when I first got involved with it, there were 27 cognitive biases that they have been able to classify. Now they're well over 100. And the definition is right there in yellow: systematic and predictable errors in judgment. Dan O'Reilly is one of them. And you can see there's a television show in the US called I want to say Irreversible. It's can't think of the name. Sorry, but it's based on his work, and the lead character is a behavioral scientist. And he helps the police and the FBI find crime, and that's the basis. But if you watch it, he keeps coming up with all of these things that they have actually done studies. O'Reilly did. Some of them were done by Thaler, some by Cass Sunstein. So let's look at some of these cognitive biases that Daniel Kahneman calls noise. Dunning-Kruger effect. In the studies they've done, this is fairly consistent, apparently mostly among the male of the species than the female, but they did a study and they found that 80% of men believe they are better than average. Mathematically, you say that's ridiculous, but we have an overinflated opinion of our abilities. The same thing holds true with what is called the overconfidence bias, the overconfidence effect, I'm sorry. And that is that, okay, I need you to predict something for me. Predict how many people are going to come to Thanksgiving dinner. And you predict, you don't know because you put out the invitation, you don't know who's going to come, and you say they're going to be 12. When the social scientists do that, cognitive behavioral scientists, they immediately follow up and say, how confident are you of your answer? And it turns out the answers are wrong. Doctors making diagnosis of patients, and then they come back 4 months later and have them do the same patient with different name, same symptoms, and they come up with a different diagnosis. Clearly, they can't come up with two different diagnoses for the same thing. But in both cases, they said, how confident are you? Oh, I'm 80%, 85% sure that this is the right thing. This is the overconfidence effect. You also have causal thinking. I mentioned this earlier. We as humans want a cause for everything. We want to say, if this happens, this is the cause. This is correlated with this, therefore one causes the other. It allows us to put things in our head, to see things clearer, so that we can organize things in the universe. The problem is that we want to do that with decision making to make our decisions easy. So we have a cause, therefore I can make that decision. The Einstein effect. The Einstein effect, discovered by a couple of guys in Germany, which would make sense, says that as a human being, we are generally likely to solve problems in the same way we've always solved problems, regardless if conditions change, situation changes, we have new technology, new ways of doing things, we will still solve problems the same way we've always solved problems. This then leads to the status quo bias, which says, yeah, all the decisions I'm going to make are to keep us doing what we're doing now, the way we're doing it. That leads to the confirmation bias, which is all the information we get supports that stance of the status quo. There's also the perceived regret. I don't want to make a decision. I'm having trouble making the decision because I believe I'm going to regret making the decision. And I don't want to regret. In studies, it's one of the people say it's one of the worst feelings. They'd rather be sad than regret. And if I make a decision, I could regret having made that decision at some time in the future. So it's not that they're regretting now, it's perceived that they're going to regret. Groupthink. This is unfortunately very insidious because you're a manager, you're a business analyst, you want everybody to work together, you want to get the collaboration, you want them all to come up with an answer, and you see that happening. And they're all working together and they all say, yes, we all want to do option A. All right, thank you, Jack, for coming up with option A. Great idea, and we all agree to it. Next day, Jack comes in and says, who thought of option A? That is the dumbest thing I ever saw. And everybody else says, yeah, you're right, it was really stupid. We didn't even think of this, and we didn't think of that, we didn't. But you, of course, you see, this is great. Everyone's agreeing. We've got our solution. We've been working on this for weeks. Now we got a solution. So it becomes very insidious. But it's groupthink. Now, all of these hail to fear. Fear of making a mistake, fear of retribution, fear of being blamed for the decision, fear of having to take responsibility to make the decision right. Fear drives our inability to make the decision, which is echoed by the emotions. We don't want these emotions in our decision-making. Well, here's some decision-making guidelines that kind of fight those guys. Only make the decisions that are yours to make. Now you don't have to worry about, a decision that's not yours, and that would cause a lot of other problems. And I like this one, and we're trying to do that. When you're looking at alternatives, the natural thing is to say, okay, this one I'm recommending is the right one, the others are wrong. Or this is the good decision, those are bad. We put a value judgment, a quality judgment on the decisions, on the alternatives. Instead of that, just consider option A and option B. Not right, not wrong, not good, not bad. Any of them could be right, any of them could be wrong, given a different set of circumstances. So forget about right and wrong. And this is the first, and we're going to end up this thing with talking about that. Make sure you know about the cognitive biases. Remember, if you don't make a decision, you did make a decision. It's the decision not to take action. For the decision regret and the TMA, too many alternatives, winnow them down before you get to the final decision stage. So you can use a scientific method, use falsification, use elimination. filtering. You can use any of these analytical things that business analysts do all the time and get rid of as many of them as you can to get down to the last 2, 3, 5. Now your decision making will be easier and you'll have less regret. The last two talk about making sure when you make a decision, you think about after the decision is made. Many times we say we have a decision to make. All right, we're going to do it. I'm done. Walk away. No, it's not that I'm going to do it. I have to make it happen. So, right versus wrong. We're going to call this valid decision making. Not right decisions, not wrong decisions, not good decisions, not bad decisions. You say, why? The decisions are right, decisions are wrong. No, they're not. When you're making the decision, you do not know whether it's right or wrong. The only way you can tell whether it's right or wrong is after it's done. And that's called hindsight bias, another cognitive, bias. I don't know whether I decide to go to breakfast, and I'm going to go down and buy breakfast, and I get there and they ran out of food. Wow, bad decision. Shouldn't have decided to go to breakfast. Well, I don't know that because I don't know they ran out of food until I get there. Somebody else says, well, that was really stupid, Steve. You should have thought of that. Well, I did. I mean, I could see that's happening. Yeah, but you have information now after the fact that I didn't have when I made the decision. What we want to do is get a valid decision process that will generate a decision, not a right or a wrong decision, and not worry about right or wrong. Just come up with a good decision, a valid decision. In fact, if you're doing this right and you want to be decisive, you're not even worried about whether the decisions are right or wrong. Remember that the studies have shown over the past 10, 15 years that the highest paid executives, the big CEOs that are making millions of dollars a year, they are no better than 33% right in their decisions. So what's a bad, non-valid? You're knee-jerk. Decision made too fast. You don't have enough information. You get information after the fact that you could have had and made a different decision. You have decision churn. You have to keep going back to the decision and redoing it. Indecisiveness, the exact opposite. Take too long, too much information. Your options get stale. The availability bias or the availability heuristic, where you come up with an answer because it's the first thing that pops into your mind and you can't think of anything else. Or you got to come up with 5, you come up with 3 and say, I can only come up with 3, therefore there are only 3. That's the availability. That's what's available to me. That's all there is. The watchword there is, this is the only way we can do it. And it's the only way because we haven't come up with alternative ways. There's the confirmation bias I mentioned earlier, twist facts to fit preconceived beliefs, and emotion-based decisions. That's non-valid. Emotion-based decisions. They're not based on available facts. Well, let's talk about emotions. There's Tom Hanks in the movie League of Our Own, talking to Madonna, and Madonna's crying. And Tom Hanks is the coach of this women's team during World War II. He says, are you crying? There's no crying in baseball. That's one of those famous sayings usually included in the top 50 sayings for movies. There's no crying in baseball. Well, we're going to kind of redo that and say, there's no emotion in business. Everything's going to be facts, no emotion. But is that really true? We want to remove emotion completely from the equation. Emotion can be helpful in defining what is good, because that emotion tells us what is good and what is desirable. So we don't necessarily want to remove all emotion, but we want to control it so that we have it. So how do you do it? Here's one, force field analysis. It turns out that you would probably do this. Yeah, I want to go out of town. I'm going to take an out-of-town position requiring a move. So we got a piece of paper, write the cons on one side and the pros on the other side. There are my pros. I'm going to increase wages. It's more prestige, a new opportunity, bigger house. So what's against? Well, no flexibility, loss of friends, no new social life, etc. When you look at that, you say, well, clearly we're not going. Look at all the things against. But those are all emotional. And maybe subconsciously, I don't want to go, so I'm going to come up with a lot more negatives than positives. But it's all emotional. So force field analysis says, let's throw some numbers at it. When you put numbers, introduce numbers, mathematics of any kind, your brain flips over to the frontal cortex. You're now in system 2. Okay? So Now we start putting numbers. Let's say 1 to 5. 5 is very important to us. 1 is not that important. Well, we got those guys numbered. We number the other side. Oh, add them up. We got 20 to move, 14 not to move. Suddenly things change. Now we're looking at more objectively simply because we forced our brains to move into the frontal cortex. Well, let's do it even more. Here's another form of decision-making, a ranking process. So we define what it is. I want to get a car. What's important to me is that we have a trunk, a big trunk. Right? We do a lot of travel. We put our suitcases in the trunk. And I want low-price gas. And I want something that doesn't need a lot of repairs. Okay? So what is the rating? Okay, well, the trunk, yeah, I guess we could probably pack better. So that's a 3 out of 5. But the gas, that's definitely a 5. It's got to be a good gas mileage. And the repair, we'll call that a 3 also. Now we have rated the factors, put numbers on them. So it's not emotion. Now I'm visualizing putting stuff in the garage, so it's very important. But once I start weighing it and having to put numbers, it's not quite as important as I thought. Now I'm going to go out and look at a whole bunch of different cars, and I'm going to compare them by things. I'm going to say this is a great car, except the trunk isn't very big, so it gets a 2. And it's great gas mileage, so it gets a 5. And doesn't have a great maintenance record, so it's got a 3. So each of the options that I'm going to score them the same way, without any relation to the rating factors themselves. Once I've done that, I've got 3 cars. They all have the score. I multiply the rating factors by the weight for each option, gets a score, and then that's my decision. All math, all frontal cortex stuff. You say, oh, come on, Steve, that's work and math and all that. I mean, yeah, it's objective, but okay, I'll give you another option. How about decision age? Flip a coin, throw a dart, throw dice. I'm being serious here. This is actually, again, from the cognitive world there. When you do a flip coin, for example, heads, we move, tails, we stay. And you flip the coin and it's tails. Okay, let's go best 2 out of 3. Okay, no, tails still wins. Let's go best 3 out of 5. What it's doing is forcing you to really evaluate and look deeply at the problem, at the decision you're making, and make it so that you then will come up exactly what you want, both from a conscious system 2 as well as system 1. It's a prompt. You're not really going to flip the coin and go with the coin. But the fact that you're doing it, even if all you're doing is flipping, will make you clarify what you're looking at. It's not a kind of a fun thing. It's something that you could use. Let's look at how we do this. As we wrap this up, here's a timeline. Here's the decision. Somebody says we need to decide about something, or we have a problem. The first thing you do as a business analyst when somebody says we have a new job, a new task, is that you then gather information. So we gather information in order to define the problem, to set the context for the decision we're making. Then we're going to gather more information so that we can look at multiple solutions, because we have to come up with alternatives. That's the rule. We saw that. So I come up with 3 alternatives as a result of that information. Now I'm going to do it again. More information in order to come up with a definitive statement of this is the one we recommend. This is the one we want to go, and a decision is made. And you go out there and you're going to get that decision, try to make it work, and suddenly somebody comes up and says, hey, this isn't working. It's a bad decision. Steve, you really screwed up. You made a bad decision. Why? Because of this and this. Yeah, but that all occurred after the decision was made. We didn't have privy to that information. You do, because you're deciding way down the timeline. We didn't do it. Our decision was valid. You say, oh, wait, Steve, come on. I was just getting comfortable with all this. I was getting used. I'm now ready to go start making decisions. And now you say that even if you do a valid decision, it's still going to come back and say that it was all wrong. Wait. I have a get out of jail free card for you. A real one right there. Get out of jail free. All decisions are 100% complete and correct, provided proper analysis has been done based on the information we have at this time. Include those magic words at the end. Based on the information we have right now, this is a valid decision. This is the best decision we can make. You say, oh yeah, cool, Steve, but what's proper analysis? Oh, I'm glad you asked. The decision is based on the information, the whole information, and nothing but the information. In other words, all the information we have, we've analyzed, we looked at, and we said, yes, this will go to make this contributed to making the decision. And we didn't add any extra information of our own. No assumptions, no extra. We didn't skew the decision to meet something we wanted. That's proper analysis. Ultimately, the final takeaway. Don't worry about making the right decision. Seriously, don't worry about it. Instead, make the decision. Just make it. I'm not saying arbitrarily, just once you've got the information, you've analyzed it, you know what it is, make the decision, then focus on making the decision right. I don't need to get a right decision because I'm going to make the decision right. With that, I'll turn it over to Tracy, and hopefully we have time for questions.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you again for such a great presentation. Just a reminder for everyone, please type your questions into the questions box. Steve, let's give everyone just a minute or so to get their questions in. We don't have a lot of time today. Also, a reminder that this session is going to be recorded and is recorded and will be posted on the Modern Analyst website within 2 business days. And let's look for the questions. You have a lovely comment saying that this was a great and very helpful presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. And we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes. It seems like we have a quiet bunch today. Does anyone have any questions for Steve? You can see that Steve has his phone number and his email address. So if you do have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to Steve, which is very thoughtful. All right, Steve, I think we should just give everyone just a minute or so more. Oh,
sure.
There's another comment, I think, coming in. Oh, thank you for providing the tools to help with eliminating fear from the decision-making process.
You're welcome.
And another comment, no questions, but I do want to say that you're amazing and it was very engaging. Thank you so much for this training.
You're welcome.
This is even better than questions. Let's just give everyone a minute or so. Let's give everyone just a minute or so. Questions, comments about today's session or any of Steve's webinars. You can find so many of them posted on the Modern Analyst website. Okay, here's a question. Oh, we got a couple. How do you make decisions when dealing with a difficult stakeholder who is never available for an interview or a workshop?
Well, there are 2 things there. One is how do you deal with a difficult stakeholder? But you started out saying, how do you make decisions? And my question would be, what decisions would you be making? A decision to not deal with them? Now, the one thing about difficult is that you want to determine is why. Are they against the system coming in, the new process, the new features? Are they against it? And then there are people who, for all sorts of reasons, might be against it. And that's why they're difficult. It might be that I had a situation, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, where a fellow was retiring, and we were putting in a brand new accounting system. He was in accounting, been there for 20, 30 years, and everything was being done all new. And he was retiring in like a couple of years. He already had actually it was less than that. He already had his brochures, he was going to the Keys in Florida and going to live there and so forth. he did not want to it turned out, we didn't know this to start, he didn't want to get involved with the new system. He didn't want to learn something new. No, he didn't want to. So his idea was if he delays things, he can get out of there before the new system comes in. So he was very difficult. He didn't show up at meetings. He'd say, I'll be there, and they wouldn't. When we finally pinned him down and got him, the manager made him sit down. He wasn't very cooperative in giving answers until we found out, until somehow accidentally we found out what he was doing. He was sabotaging. And you really can't blame him. So the company came up with something that he could do while everybody else was working on the new system, and he became very cooperative. Now, if the person is dead set against the system, please talk to them. Tell them you want to find out why they're against the system, not to convince them, but to find out why, because it could be legitimate. They could have some, I've run into those where they were against the system and they had reasons to be against the system that we didn't look at. All the people who wanted the system, rose-colored glasses. They're confirmation bias. The system is great. There's nothing wrong with it. Person who's against it says, yeah, but you haven't thought of this. And that's something you want to know as a business analyst. I'm not sure what decision you would be associated with a difficult stakeholder other than dealing with them or not.
Thank you, Steve. Very interesting. I'm going to read out some more comments for you, or compliments, I should say. You are speaking my love language. Thank you so much. Great job. Steve, thank you again for another amazing presentation. And Steve, thank you. That was very helpful.
You're
Well,
welcome
what a
all.
great question period. We do have time for a question or two more if anybody wants to get that in. And if not, maybe, oh, there you go. You got a great job. Compliment as well. Okay, then. I think that's all the questions for today, Steve. So we'd love to thank you yet again for presenting for us. We'd like to thank everyone for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. I'd like to remind everyone that today's webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at the ModernAnalyst.com website within a few days. This concludes today's event, and we hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye. Thank you.